close your eyes for a moment, take a deep breath, and let's step back in time. Not just a little step, we're going 5,000 years back. No phones, no cars, no Wi-Fi, just the endless desert, the soft sound of wind, and the gentle flow of the river Nile under the warm Egyptian sun. You're standing right there, barefoot on the golden sand. The air smells like dry earth mixed with fresh river water. The sky above is wide and endless, glowing with a soft, golden light. You hear birds calling as they glide over the Nile. Somewhere nearby, a fisherman is pulling in his nets, humming a tune older than history itself. Welcome to ancient Egypt. The land before time had a name. Imagine this, it's the year 3000 BCE. Though, to be honest, nobody here knows that yet. People don't even have calendars like ours. They follow the rhythm of the Nile instead. When it floods, when it retreats, when the crops are ready, life is simple, quiet, and beautifully connected to nature. Back then, Egypt wasn't even called Egypt. It was known as Kemet, the Black Land, named after the dark, fertile soil left behind by the Nile's floods. Every year, when the river overflowed, it turned the dry desert into a green paradise, and the people saw it as a blessing from the gods. The desert on both sides, that was called Desheret, the Red Land. Hot, dry, endless, a sea of sand where very few dared to wander. But to the Egyptians, this contrast, black land and red land, was life itself. Without the Nile, there would be no Egypt. A civilization is born. Around you, small villages are slowly growing into towns. People are busy, baking bread, weaving linen, carving tools, and trading goods in open markets shaded by palm leaves. Wooden boats glide gently on the Nile, carrying fish, grain, and pottery from one settlement to another. And here's something funny. Nobody knows it yet, but they're building one of the world's first great civilizations. No one is trying to make history. They're just living. And in the process, they're creating legends. Somewhere upriver, a young leader is dreaming big. His name is Narmer, though some will call him Menes later in the scrolls. He will soon unite Upper and Lower Egypt, bringing together two lands, two crowns, and two peoples under one rule. It's like the first national merger in history. No lawyers, no Zoom meetings, just pure ancient diplomacy, with a few battles on the side, of course. The mystery of the Nile. The Nile isn't just a river here, it's the heartbeat of life. Every year, like clockwork, it floods the land, leaving behind rich, dark soil, perfect for farming. And honestly, Egyptians were living the dream compared to other ancient civilizations struggling in dry lands. While their neighbors were praying for rain, Egypt had an all-natural irrigation system, one they believed was a direct gift from the gods. At night, villagers would gather under the stars and watch the river shimmer under the moonlight. They'd tell stories about Hapi, the Nile god, who they believed controlled the floods. If the river rose too high, they'd think the gods were angry. If it didn't rise enough, they'd pray for forgiveness. But here's the thing. In their eyes, this wasn't just survival. This was a partnership between humans and nature, a kind of silent understanding. Respect the river, and the river gives life. Ignore it, and the desert takes over. The first pharaohs. Life is calm here, but make no mistake, big changes are happening. A new kind of leader is rising, someone the people will call Pharaoh. Now, the word Pharaoh literally means great house, like we'd say the White House today. But for Egyptians, it was much more than politics. Pharaohs weren't just kings, they were living gods. Imagine meeting one. Tall linen crowns, gold jewelry that sparkles under the sun, robes flowing like silk waterfalls. Everywhere they walk, people bow their heads. But pharaohs also carried responsibility, protecting Egypt, keeping order, pleasing the gods, and making sure the Nile stayed in harmony with the heavens. And you know what? That belief, that leaders were part human, part divine, gave the Egyptians something unique: unity. People trusted their pharaohs to guide them, and in return, they built monuments, temples, and entire cities to honor them. A walk through the village. Let's leave the palaces for a moment and walk through a small Egyptian village. The sun is setting now, painting the desert sky orange and pink. Children run barefoot, chasing each other between mud brick houses. Women grind grain to make fresh flatbread, while men return from the fields carrying baskets of wheat and dates. A gentle breeze carries the smell of roasting fish from a nearby fire. At the center of the village, a storyteller begins weaving tales of gods and heroes. His voice is soft and rhythmic, like a lullaby. People gather around, listening under the glow of oil lamps. And just beyond the village, you see the silhouettes of massive structures slowly rising against the horizon. These will become the pyramids, but right now, they're just giant piles of limestone blocks waiting to be shaped by thousands of patient hands. The calm before the golden age. It's peaceful here, but you can feel something big coming. Egypt is growing fast. Farmers are producing more food than ever. Artists are carving statues. Painters are decorating walls. Priests are mapping the stars. Knowledge is spreading. Trade is booming. And whispers of greatness are everywhere. In just a few generations, this land will become the heart of the ancient world, a place of pharaohs, gods, temples, and wonders that will stand for thousands of years. But for now, as night falls over the Nile, all you hear is the soft splash of water, the quiet hum of crickets, and the warm desert breeze. You take a deep breath. You feel calm. Time slows down. This is where our journey begins. If you ever want to know how ancient Egypt became one of the greatest civilizations in history, here's the short answer: the Nile. Without it, there would be no pyramids, no pharaohs, no temples, and definitely no bedtime documentary about Egypt right now. Just endless desert. But instead, here we are, standing on the banks of the world's longest river, watching it glitter under the morning sun. The air smells fresh and warm. Birds skim across the water, and papyrus plants sway gently in the breeze. You can almost hear the Nile whispering, "Relax, I've got you." A river that creates life. For the ancient Egyptians, the Nile wasn't just a river, it was life itself. Imagine living in a place where 95% of the land is burning desert. Then, right in the middle of all that heat and sand, there's this magical blue ribbon flowing quietly through it. Without the Nile, people simply couldn't survive here. With it, though, the desert transformed into an oasis of green and gold. Every single thing in Egyptian life, food, trade, religion, festivals, and even love poems, somehow connects back to the Nile. The 3 seasons of the Nile. Egyptians didn't have 4 seasons like we do today. Instead, they lived by the rhythm of 3 magical cycles, each controlled by the Nile. Akhet, flooding season. From June to September, the Nile would rise and overflow its banks. People didn't panic. In fact, they celebrated. They believed the river's flood was a blessing from the gods, especially from Hapi, the god of the Nile. Fields disappeared underwater, and farmers got a few months off. Imagine that, a whole season of no farming, basically the first ancient Egyptian vacation. Perit, planting season. From October to February, the water slowly receded, leaving behind a thick, dark layer of silt, the most fertile soil in the ancient world. Farmers rushed out with wooden plows and baskets of seeds, planting wheat, barley, flax, and vegetables. Picture the fields stretching endlessly along the Nile, full of fresh green shoots under the soft winter sun. Shemu, harvest season. From March to May, the crops ripened under the golden Egyptian sun. It was a time of hard work, but also festivity. Families gathered, singing and laughing as they cut wheat with curved sickles. Then came feasts, music, and dancing. After all, the Nile had provided another year of life. Happy, the god of abundance. To the Egyptians, the Nile wasn't just water. It was a living, divine being. They worshipped Happy, the god who controlled the annual floods. But here's the funny part. Happy wasn't portrayed like a strong warrior or king. Nope. He was shown as a chubby man with a big belly, wearing lotus flowers, sometimes holding fish and water plants. Why? Because in Egyptian eyes, a little belly meant prosperity, plenty of food for everyone. Every year when the Nile flooded perfectly, people celebrated Happy's generosity. They offered bread, flowers, and even tiny carved boats as gifts, thanking him for another year of life. A walk through the fields. Let's take a slow walk along the riverbank. The sun is soft, the sand warm under your feet. Farmers bend over, gently planting seeds while oxen pull wooden plows through the wet soil. Children splash in the shallow edges of the river, chasing tiny fish with wicker baskets. Nearby, a group of women stand by the water, washing clothes and singing folk songs older than the pyramids. You catch the rhythm of their voices carried on the breeze. It's simple, peaceful, and beautiful. A life deeply tied to the land and the river. Nile festivals and celebrations. Egyptians didn't just work with the Nile, they celebrated it. The biggest festival of all was the Night of the Teardrop. According to legend, the goddess Isis cried tears of sorrow when her husband Osiris died, and those tears became the annual floods of the Nile. Every year, when the river started rising, people believed Isis was crying again, but in a good way. They held feasts, lit oil lamps, played flutes, and danced by the riverbanks under the stars. Imagine hundreds of little clay lamps floating gently on the water, their reflections shimmering like fireflies across the dark surface of the Nile. If you stood there, it would feel like magic. The Nile and the stars. Here's something fascinating. Egyptians believed the floods were connected to the heavens. They noticed that every year, just before the Nile began to rise, the star Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, would appear just above the horizon. To them, this wasn't coincidence. Sirius was the goddess Sopdet, and her rising signaled the start of Akhet, the flood season. It was one of the earliest examples of humans connecting astronomy with nature. So while other civilizations were guessing when to plant, Egyptians had Sirius as their cosmic calendar. A day on the Nile. Imagine floating down the river on a small wooden boat. The water is calm, reflecting the blue sky like polished glass. Birds glide low, touching the surface with their wings. Farmers wave from the riverbanks, carrying baskets of dates and figs. The soft sound of oars dips into the water, creating ripples that sparkle in the sunlight. You pass a fisherman, patiently mending his nets, and he smiles as you float by. In the distance, temple walls rise, covered in hieroglyphs that tell stories older than memory itself. Everything moves slowly here, in harmony with the river. No rush, no stress, no deadlines, just a gentle rhythm of life. The Nile's endless gift. The Nile didn't just give Egypt food, it gave them connection to each other, to their gods, and to the universe itself. From the smallest farmer to the most powerful pharaoh, Everyone depended on this single ribbon of life. It was the country's highway, water source, energy, and heart, all in one. Egyptians called their land the gift of the Nile, and standing here, watching the sun dip low and turn the river into molten gold, you understand why. Night over the river. As the day fades, the desert cools. The sky darkens into a deep velvet blue, and stars spill across the heavens like glitter. On the riverbank, families gather around small fires, roasting fish and telling stories. You hear gentle laughter mixing with the chirping of crickets. The Nile flows quietly in the darkness, reflecting the moonlight like liquid silver. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the soft hum of the river. It feels calm. It feels safe. It feels eternal. And as the Nile whispers its ancient song, you realize this is more than history. This is the story of life itself. Take a slow, deep breath. The soft breeze from the Nile brushes against your face, and the golden desert stretches endlessly around you. We're about to step into a time when Egypt was just waking up. This is the story of how scattered little villages slowly transformed into a powerful, united kingdom. It didn't happen overnight. No magic, no sudden miracles. Just thousands of tiny steps that together became one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever seen. From villages to kingdoms. Close your eyes and picture it. Small farming villages line the banks of the Nile. The homes are made of sun-dried mud bricks, simple but sturdy. Chickens wander around, goats nibble on dry grass, and children splash in the shallow water, laughing under the soft sun. But something is changing. Trade is growing. Farmers exchange grain for fish, linen for pottery, honey for beer. People are talking, sharing ideas, and slowly, almost without realizing it, these small villages begin forming communities. Over generations, these communities grow into towns and then into small kingdoms. Egypt eventually splits into two main regions: Upper Egypt, the southern land closer to the river's source, full of fertile valleys, and Lower Egypt, the northern delta, where the river spreads into branches before kissing the Mediterranean Sea. These two lands developed different cultures, crowns, and traditions. They were like siblings who loved each other but argued a lot. The two crowns. Upper Egypt's kings wore tall, elegant white crowns, symbolizing the hot, dry highlands. Lower Egypt's rulers, on the other hand, wore red crowns, shaped like the lush delta where the river met the sea. And just to make things more interesting, these kings weren't exactly friends. For hundreds of years, Upper and Lower Egypt lived side by side but separately, each with its own temples, armies, and traditions. But deep down, everyone knew something. The Nile connected them. And one day, they would need to be united. Enter King Narmer. Around 3100 BCE, a young, ambitious ruler from Upper Egypt appears, Narmer. Narmer believed Egypt would be stronger as one kingdom, one river, one land, one people. Of course, convincing Lower Egypt wasn't as easy as sending a polite letter. There were battles, long, exhausting ones. But Narmer was clever. He wasn't just a warrior, he was a strategist. Slowly, carefully, he pushed north until he claimed victory. To celebrate, Narmer wore something special, a double crown, the white crown of Upper Egypt stacked with the red crown of Lower Egypt. It symbolized unity, strength, and balance. From this moment on, Egypt wasn't two lands anymore. It became one kingdom, ruled by one king, the first pharaoh. The first pharaohs. Now here's the thing. Egyptians didn't just see Narmer as a political leader. They believed he had been chosen by the gods. The pharaoh was seen as the living connection between humans and the divine. Part man, part God. When the pharaoh spoke, it wasn't just his voice, it was the will of the heavens. That belief created something powerful: unity. People across hundreds of miles, from the deserts of the south to the marshes of the north, followed one leader, one set of laws, and one vision for Egypt. Narmer started what we now call the First Dynasty, laying the foundation for over 3,000 years of pharaohs, temples, and golden age after golden age. A day in the first capital. With Egypt united, Narmer needed a place to rule from, so he founded the city of Memphis, near the Nile Delta. Imagine walking through Memphis during this time. The streets are busy with traders selling dates, figs, linen, and handmade jewelry. Priests walk calmly toward temples, carrying incense burners. Scribes sit under shaded porches, carving symbols into clay tablets, the earliest form of Egyptian writing. Boats glide on the river, carrying grain to distant towns. The air smells like a mix of honey, spices, and fresh papyrus. Life feels vibrant, alive, and full of promise. The birth of hieroglyphs. One of the most fascinating inventions of this time was writing, specifically hieroglyphs. Before hieroglyphs, Egyptians used simple pictures to record information, like how many goats someone owned or how many jars of beer were stored for a festival. But as Egypt grew, they needed something more sophisticated. So they created an entire system of symbols, tiny pictures carved into stone or written on papyrus scrolls. Hieroglyphs could represent sounds, words, and ideas all at once. Imagine the first scribes dipping their reed pens into black ink made from soot, carefully drawing symbols on fresh papyrus sheets. They probably didn't know it, but they were writing the first chapters of history itself. Religion and order. Egypt's unification also brought a new sense of spiritual harmony. Temples were built to honor the gods of both Upper and Lower Egypt, creating a shared identity among the people. Festivals became larger, grander, and more frequent, celebrating not just the gods, but the unity of the kingdom. The pharaohs claimed their power came from Ma'at, the concept of cosmic order, truth, and balance. If Ma'at was kept, the Nile would flood on time, the crops would grow, and life would remain peaceful. If not, well, let's just say nobody wanted to test that theory. Daily life during the first dynasties. While pharaohs built palaces and scribes invented hieroglyphs, ordinary people kept life simple. Farmers planted wheat and barley in the fertile Nile soil. Fishermen spent quiet mornings casting nets, humming old river songs. Craftsmen shaped clay pots, carved wooden statues, and hammered copper tools. Families gathered at night, sharing bread, dates, and stories by the fire. There were no televisions, no social media, no rush. Life followed the rhythm of the Nile, steady, calm, and unhurried. A land awakens. By the end of Narmer's reign, Egypt had transformed. Two lands became one. Villages became cities. Simple farming became advanced agriculture. Pictures turned into hieroglyphs, and kings became gods on earth. Standing on the banks of the Nile now, you can feel it.
Egypt is no longer a scattered land of farmers and fishermen. It is becoming something greater, something eternal. And this is only the beginning. As the sun sets over the river, casting gold across the water, the air grows still. The stars slowly emerge, one by one, and the gentle breeze carries the smell of night-blooming flowers. Tomorrow, Egypt will rise higher. Tomorrow, pyramids will touch the sky. But tonight, the land sleeps, dreaming of greatness.
Take a deep breath and imagine this. The sun rises over the golden desert, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The air is warm, but not yet hot, and the distant hum of workers echoes across the sand. We've entered the Old Kingdom, around 2600 BCE, a time when Egypt is at its most confident, most ambitious, and perhaps most mysterious. This is the era when humans dared to do the impossible. This is the age of the pyramids, dreams written in stone. By now, Egypt has become a land of order and prosperity. The pharaohs are powerful. The Nile is generous, and people believe their kingdom is protected by the gods themselves. But there's one big thought on everyone's mind. How do we make sure our pharaohs live forever? The answer? Build monuments so grand, so eternal, that not even time could erase them. Enter King Djoser, ruler of the Third Dynasty. Around 2650 BCE, he decides to build something no one had ever seen before, a stone monument that would rise toward the heavens. With the help of his brilliant architect, Imhotep, yes, the real one, not the movie villain, Djoser builds the Step Pyramid at Saqqara. It wasn't smooth like the later pyramids. It had 6 steps, like a giant staircase for the pharaoh's soul to climb up to the gods. And when it was finished, people must have stood in awe, whispering, "How did they do this?" The experiment. After Djoser's success, other pharaohs wanted their own pyramids. Some attempts, though, didn't exactly go as planned. Take the bent pyramid of Pharaoh Sneferu. He wanted a smooth-sided pyramid, a perfect triangle touching the sky. But halfway through construction, the angle was too steep and cracks started forming. So the builders panicked a little, changed the angle, and ended up with a pyramid that bends. Was Sneferu angry? Maybe at first. But here's the thing, Sneferu wasn't just ambitious, he was determined. He said, "All right, let's try again." So, a few miles away, he built the Red Pyramid, Egypt's first successful smooth-sided masterpiece. Lesson learned. Even in 2600 BCE, sometimes your first design doesn't work, but the second one can change history. The Pyramids of Giza. Now, get ready to witness perfection. Under Pharaoh Khufu, also called Cheops, Egypt builds the Great Pyramid of Giza, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It stands over 480 feet tall and is made of more than 2 million limestone blocks. Some of these blocks weigh as much as 80 tons. Take a moment and imagine the scene. Thousands of workers hauling massive stones using sledges and ropes. Wooden ramps rising like rivers of sand around the pyramid's core. The sound of chisels tapping, ropes tightening, and songs echoing across the desert. And here's something people often get wrong. The workers weren't slaves. Most historians agree they were skilled laborers. Farmers who worked on the pyramids during the Nile's flood season when their fields were underwater. They were paid in bread, beer, and onions. Yes, onions, Egypt's original energy food. It took around 20 years to build the Great Pyramid, and when it was complete, its polished limestone casing stones shone so brightly under the sun that travelers said it looked like a mountain of light. The mysteries behind the masterpiece. Even today,
The pyramids hold secrets. How did they transport such massive stones without modern machinery? How did they achieve such perfect alignment with the stars? And why were the pyramids built with such mathematical precision that even today satellite images show them nearly flawless? One theory is that the Egyptians used long, straight ramps. Another suggests spiraling ramps wrapping around the pyramid as it rose. But the truth is, we don't fully know. And maybe that's the magic of it. Some mysteries are meant to stay unsolved. The Great Sphinx. Standing proudly next to the pyramids is a guardian like no other, the Great Sphinx of Giza. Carved from a single block of limestone, it stretches over 240 feet long and 66 feet high. Imagine a lion's body with a human face staring endlessly toward the horizon. But here's the mystery. Nobody knows for sure when it was built or why. Some believe Pharaoh Khafre ordered it as a symbol of strength and wisdom. Others think it's even older than the pyramids themselves. Over thousands of years, the Sphinx faced storms, sand, and time itself. Its nose, long gone, and no, it did not get shot off by Napoleon. Sorry, internet myths. But even weathered and worn, it remains one of Egypt's most powerful icons, keeping silent watch over the desert. Life around Giza. It's easy to imagine the pyramids standing alone in the desert, but back then, Giza was alive. Picture thousands of workers living in bustling camps nearby. There were bakeries producing over 20,000 loaves of bread a day, breweries brewing gallons of beer, and markets buzzing with traders selling fish, onions, dates, and pottery. At night, after long hours of hauling stone, workers gathered around fires, laughing, telling stories, and singing under the stars. Maybe they complained about the boss. Maybe they argued over who hauled the heaviest block. But one thing's certain, there was pride in their work. They knew they were building something bigger than themselves, something eternal. The Pharaoh's Promise. The pyramids weren't just tombs, they were gateways to eternity. Egyptians believed the pharaoh wasn't truly gone after death. His soul traveled to the afterlife to join the gods. The pyramids were designed to help him guide him there, stocked with treasures, food, clothes, and even furniture. In a way, these monuments weren't built for the living at all. They were built for forever. And the people? They believed that by helping their pharaoh reach the afterlife, they too would share in the blessings of the gods. Under the moonlight. Night falls over Giza. The desert cools, and the wind carries soft whispers across the sand. The pyramids glow faintly under the starlight, their sharp edges softened by the darkness. The Sphinx gazes silently into the horizon, as if guarding secrets no human will ever fully understand. You sit on the warm sand, watching the shadows stretch and the stars appear one by one. There's a deep, calming silence here, broken only by the faint rustle of the wind. In this moment, you realize the pyramids aren't just monuments of stone. They're monuments of dreams, of ambition, of faith in something greater than life itself. Take a deep breath and let the scene unfold. The grand pyramids are behind us now, fading into the golden haze of the desert. In front of us lies the gentle curve of the river Nile, stretching endlessly under the soft morning sun. This isn't the story of kings or monuments. This is the story of ordinary people, the farmers, fishermen, bakers, and artisans who made ancient Egypt thrive. It's slower, quieter, and simpler, but no less magical. Morning on the riverbank. The first rays of sunlight kiss the water, turning the Nile into a mirror of gold. The air is cool, carrying the sweet scent of lotus flowers. Down by the riverbank, farmers are already awake. You hear the soft swish of water as oxen pull wooden plows through damp soil, leaving dark furrows behind. Their feet sink slightly into the mud, but they don't mind. The Nile has been generous this year. Children laugh as they chase each other through the fields, while women carry baskets of figs, dates, and fresh bread, balancing them effortlessly on their heads. The village is waking up, slowly and beautifully. Farming the Egyptian way. Life here revolves around the 3 seasons of the Nile: flooding, planting, and harvesting. Every family plays a part. During Akhet, when the river floods, farmers take a break, repairing tools and mending fishing nets. During Paret, they sow seeds: wheat, barley, chickpeas, onions, and even flax for linen. During Shemu, the fields glow gold under the sun, and entire families join the harvest. Imagine hundreds of people cutting stalks of wheat together, singing folk songs to keep the rhythm. Laughter mixes with the rustle of dried grain. At the end of the day, baskets overflow, ready to be stored for the months ahead. For Egyptians, farming isn't just survival, it's a ritual of gratitude. Every good harvest feels like a blessing from the gods. Inside an Egyptian home. Let's step into one of the small mud brick houses by the river. The walls are cool and smooth, made from a simple mix of mud and straw baked under the sun. Inside, it's quiet and cozy. A clay oven in the corner still holds the warmth of freshly baked flatbread. On a low wooden table, there's a bowl of lentil stew, a plate of figs, and a jug of cool water drawn from the Nile. The beds are simple mats woven from reeds, soft enough to rest on after a long day's work. Near the wall, you see clay jars filled with beer. Yes, beer. Egyptians drank it daily, and children even had a lighter version. Beer wasn't just for fun, it was safer to drink than untreated river water. The marketplace. By midday, the village market comes alive. Stalls made from wooden planks and palm leaves line the narrow streets. The smell of honey, dried fish, and roasted duck floats in the warm air. People barter loudly but cheerfully. A fisherman swaps baskets of tilapia for bundles of flax. A potter sells jars painted with lotus flowers. A perfumer carefully grinds petals into fragrant oils. And at the center of it all, there's a scribe sitting cross-legged, writing receipts on fresh papyrus. Literacy is rare, so scribes are highly respected. They're like the human Google Docs of ancient Egypt. The market isn't just for trade, it's the heart of the community. People meet, gossip, and share news from neighboring villages. Every laugh, every handshake, every shared story ties the community closer together. Egyptian cuisine, a taste of simplicity. Let's talk about food. And yes, Egyptians love to eat well. Their diet was simple but surprisingly diverse. Bread was the main staple, made from emmer wheat and baked in clay ovens. Beer was the drink of choice, served at almost every meal. Fish from the Nile, tilapia, catfish, and perch was grilled, dried, or stewed. Vegetables like onions, lentils, cucumbers, and chickpeas filled most plates. Fruits were treats. Figs, dates, grapes, and melons sweetened daily life. For the wealthy, meals became feasts. Roasted goose, honey cakes, and fine wine were served on polished copper plates. But even for ordinary families, food was more than nutrition. It was comfort. Eating together was sacred. Clothing and daily style. Under the warm Egyptian sun, fashion had to be practical. Most people wore simple linen garments, cool and breathable in the heat. Men typically wore short kilts tied at the waist. Women wore long, flowing dresses, often pleated for style. Children, most ran around naked until about 6 years old. Easy, breezy, and laundry-free. Jewelry was everywhere though, even for common folk. Beaded necklaces, copper bracelets, and carved amulets were worn for beauty and protection. Egyptians believed certain stones could ward off evil and bring good luck. Festivals by the river. Life wasn't all work. Egyptians loved festivals, and the Nile was often at the center of celebrations. The Festival of Opet in Thebes, for example, was one of the grandest events. Priests carried statues of the gods down the river in golden boats, accompanied by music, dancing, and feasting. In smaller villages, festivals were simpler, but just as joyful. People decorated their homes with flowers, lit oil lamps at night, and played flutes and drums around bonfires. Children danced barefoot, and elders told stories of gods and pharaohs under the stars. For Egyptians, festivals weren't just fun. They were a way to connect with the divine, celebrate community, and give thanks for the blessings of the Nile. Evening in the village. As the sun dips below the horizon, the heat softens into a warm breeze. Shadows stretch across the fields, and the air fills with the chirping of crickets. Families gather outside their homes, sitting on low stools around small fires. Someone strums a lute, while a grandmother tells stories about the gods, Ra, Isis, and Osiris, in a soft, melodic voice. Children curl up on woven mats, yawning as the flames flicker. Somewhere nearby, a fisherman pushes his little boat into the glowing river, hoping to catch one last haul under the starlight. It's quiet now, calm, safe. The Nile flows steadily in the darkness, carrying whispers of stories yet untold. The soul of Egypt. Daily life in ancient Egypt wasn't about power or riches. It was about harmony, with nature, with the gods, and with one another. Every loaf of bread baked, every boat launched, every song sung under the stars was part of a rhythm that had lasted for centuries. Standing here, you realize something beautiful. It wasn't the pyramids or the temples that truly kept Egypt alive. It was the people and the river that gave them life. The sun rises slowly over the Nile, its golden light spilling across temples, palm trees, and distant pyramids. A gentle breeze carries the faint smell of lotus flowers. But today, we're leaving the quiet villages behind and stepping into the heart of power, the royal courts of ancient Egypt. Here, in polished halls lined with columns and gold, one person rules over everything: the Pharaoh. Pharaoh, God on earth. To the ancient Egyptians, the Pharaoh wasn't just a king or queen. They believed the Pharaoh was divine, the living embodiment of Horus, the falcon-headed god of the sky, and the chosen representative of the gods on earth. When the Pharaoh spoke, it wasn't just a political decision, it was believed to be the will of the heavens. If the Nile flooded on time, it was because the Pharaoh pleased the gods. If the harvest was rich, the Pharaoh was praised. If things went wrong, well, everyone started whispering nervously and making extra offerings at the temples. This belief gave the Pharaoh immense power, but also immense responsibility. They weren't just rulers, they were protectors, judges, high priests, and visionaries, all in one. The divine duties of a pharaoh. Pharaohs didn't just sit on thrones looking glamorous, though they were very, very good at that. Their role was complex. Protector of the land. The pharaoh led armies, defended borders, and made sure Egypt stayed safe from invaders. Keeper of Ma'at. Ma'at was the principle of cosmic balance, truth, harmony, and justice. Pharaohs were expected to keep Ma'at alive on earth, ensuring fairness in law, stability in society, and peace with the gods. High priest of every temple. Technically, every temple in Egypt belonged to the pharaoh. While priests handled daily rituals, the pharaoh was seen as the main bridge between gods and humans. Master of the Nile. People believed the pharaoh could influence the floods. And yes, if the Nile misbehaved, guess who got the blame? That's a lot of pressure for one person wearing a very heavy golden crown.
Inside the royal court. Let's step inside the pharaoh's palace. The ceilings rise high, decorated with painted stars to mimic the night sky. Sunlight pours in through carved stone windows, bouncing off golden furniture. Incense burns gently in bronze bowls, filling the air with a soft, sweet fragrance. Servants walk quietly along polished floors, carrying trays of honey cakes, wine, and pomegranates. Guards in linen kilts stand at attention, their copper-tipped spears glinting in the light. In the great hall, the pharaoh sits on a throne shaped like a lotus flower, its edges plated in gold. Beside them stand scribes, priests, and advisors, ready to record every royal decree. And outside these walls, messengers wait, carrying orders to every corner of Egypt, from the bustling city of Memphis to the distant temples of Thebes. Famous pharaohs, timeless legends. Egypt's history is full of extraordinary rulers. Let's meet a few. Djoser, the visionary behind the step pyramid at Saqqara, the one who started Egypt's obsession with monuments that touch the sky. Sneferu, the ambitious experimenter who built the bent pyramid and perfected the red pyramid, setting the stage for Giza's wonders. Khufu, builder of the Great Pyramid of Giza, a pharaoh whose name is literally carved into history. Hatshepsut, one of Egypt's most remarkable queens. She ruled as a female pharaoh, wore the royal beard, and built magnificent temples to prove her divine right to rule. Ramses II. Known as Ramses the Great, he led Egypt through one of its most powerful eras, signing the world's first recorded peace treaty after the Battle of Kadesh. Each pharaoh carried their own story, their own victories and challenges, but all of them were seen as part of something bigger, an unbroken chain of divine rulers guiding Egypt for thousands of years. Symbols of power. Pharaohs loved symbols, and they wore their authority proudly. The double crown, white for Upper Egypt, red for Lower Egypt, together a symbol of unity. The crook and flail. Held across the chest, they represented protection and discipline, guiding the people like a shepherd. The false beard. Even female pharaohs wore it. It wasn't about gender. It symbolized divine kingship. The uraeus cobra, a golden cobra worn on the forehead, believed to spit fire at enemies. Ancient security system, basically. These symbols weren't just decoration. They told everyone, this person isn't just ruling, they're sacred. Pharaohs and the afterlife. For the Egyptians, death wasn't the end. It was the beginning of eternity. Pharaohs spent their entire lives preparing for their next one. That's why they built elaborate tombs filled with treasures, food, jewelry, perfumes, weapons, and even furniture. They believed they would need it all in the afterlife. And the pyramids? They weren't just monuments, they were cosmic stairways, guiding the pharaoh's soul to the gods. Priests performed rituals to ensure the pharaoh's ka, or spirit, would safely pass through the underworld and join Ra, the sun god, on his eternal journey across the heavens. The weight of the crown. Being pharaoh wasn't always golden feasts and boat rides on the Nile. It came with enormous challenges. Famine. If the floods failed, the people suffered,
and the pharaoh had to act fast. Wars, protecting Egypt's borders was a constant task. Politics, balancing powerful priests, nobles, and generals required delicate negotiation. Even so, pharaohs were adored by their people, partly from faith, partly from respect, and maybe a little fear. A quiet evening in the palace. The day is ending now. The palace glows softly under the flickering light of oil lamps. Outside, the desert breeze carries the scent of warm sand and lotus blossoms. The pharaoh sits by a wide balcony overlooking the Nile. Below, small boats drift on the water, their torches reflecting like fireflies. Somewhere in the distance, a musician plucks gentle notes on a harp, filling the air with a soft, dreamy melody. For a moment, the burdens of kingship fade. The pharaoh breathes deeply, feeling the river's calm energy, the same Nile that has nourished Egypt for thousands of years. And perhaps, in that quiet, even a divine ruler wonders, what will they remember about me? The Egyptians had hundreds of gods and goddesses, each with a role to play in the balance of the universe. Some were mighty and cosmic, while others protected daily life. Here are just a few of the most beloved. Ra, the sun god, father of creation, who sailed across the sky each day and through the underworld each night. Osiris, god of the afterlife, fertility, and rebirth, often shown with green skin, symbolizing life. Isis, goddess of magic, motherhood, and healing, loved for her kindness and protection. Anubis, guardian of the dead, protector of tombs, and master of mummification. Egyptians imagined him with the head of a jackal, guiding souls safely to the afterlife. Horus, the falcon-headed god of the sky and kingship, symbolizing victory, protection, and divine authority. Thoth, god of wisdom and writing, often shown with the head of an ibis carrying scrolls filled with secrets of the universe. Hathor, goddess of music, joy, beauty, and love, worshipped by farmers, artists, and musicians alike. To the Egyptians, these gods weren't distant or abstract. They were family. They offered blessings, protection, and guidance, but they also demanded respect, rituals, and prayers. The great myth of Osiris and Isis. Among the countless stories, one stood above them all, a tale of love, betrayal, death, and eternal life. Long ago, Osiris, the gentle god of life and order, ruled Egypt alongside his beloved wife, Isis. His jealous brother, Seth, desired the throne and plotted a cruel trap. Seth built a beautiful coffin, carved perfectly to Osiris's size, and invited him to try it out. The moment Osiris lay inside, Seth slammed the lid shut, sealed it, and threw it into the Nile. Grief-stricken but determined, Isis searched across the land until she found the coffin hidden deep among the reeds. But Seth discovered her plan and, in a moment of rage, cut Osiris into 14 pieces and scattered them across Egypt. Did Isis give up? Never. She gathered every piece, one by one, and with the help of Anubis, performed the first mummification ritual, bringing Osiris back to life. Osiris could not rule the living again, but he became king of the afterlife, guiding souls to eternity. Their son Horus later avenged his father, defeating Seth and restoring harmony to Egypt. This story wasn't just a myth, it became the heart of Egyptian belief. Life, death, and rebirth are eternal. Temples, gateways to the divine. Walk with me now through a temple courtyard. The air smells faintly of incense and lotus flowers. Sunlight filters through massive stone columns, carved with hieroglyphs telling ancient stories. Priests in white linen move silently, carrying bowls of oil and bundles of papyrus. These temples weren't just places of prayer, they were seen as homes for the gods. Inside the deepest chambers, statues of deities rested on golden thrones, hidden from the public, cared for only by high priests. At dawn, priests would wake the gods with chants, perfumes, and offerings. At night, they would put them to sleep again. For Egyptians, the divine was always present, always watching. Magic and mystery. In ancient Egypt, religion and magic were inseparable. They called it Heka, the spiritual force that flowed through the universe. Priests whispered protective spells to keep evil spirits away. Mothers tied small amulets around their children's necks for safety. Farmers buried charms in their fields to bless the harvest. But Heka wasn't seen as dark or forbidden. To Egyptians, magic was life itself, a divine gift from the gods, used to maintain harmony and protect loved ones. The journey of the soul. Egyptians believed that life didn't end with death, it transformed. When someone died, their soul began a journey through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. But this wasn't a frightening place, it was a gateway to eternity. Anubis, the jackal-headed god, guided the soul to the Hall of Judgment, where Osiris sat upon a throne of gold. In the center of the hall stood a giant scale. On one side rested the feather of Maat, symbolizing truth and justice. On the other lay the person's heart. If the heart was lighter than the feather, the soul entered eternal paradise, living forever among the gods. But if it was heavy with sin, it was devoured by Ammit, a fearsome creature part lion, crocodile, and hippopotamus. This belief shaped everything: how Egyptians lived, loved, worked, and worshipped. Life on earth was temporary, the afterlife was forever. The mysteries that remain. Even today, much about Egyptian mythology remains unsolved. Why were certain gods half human, half animal? How did priests decide which rituals pleased which deities? Why did some myths differ from temple to temple? Maybe that's the beauty of it. Some questions aren't meant to be answered. Some mysteries are meant to be felt, not solved. Night over the temples. As the sun sets behind massive temple walls, shadows stretch across the desert. The chants of priests fade into the evening breeze, replaced by the soft rustle of palm trees. The stars emerge one by one, reflecting on the Nile's dark surface. Somewhere in the distance, an oil lamp flickers near a shrine, casting a warm glow on carvings thousands of years old. Here, under this eternal sky, you understand why Egyptians saw their gods in everything: in the sun's warmth, the river's flood, the whispering winds, and the endless stars above. For them, the divine wasn't far away. It was everywhere. Take a slow, deep breath. The golden sun is rising over the Nile, and a gentle breeze carries the scent of lotus flowers. Today, we're leaving behind the villages and pyramids, stepping into a world of sacred stone and silent mysteries. This is the land of temples. Not small ones, not modest ones. We're talking about structures so massive, so carefully designed, that even thousands of years later, they still whisper the secrets of a civilization obsessed with eternity. Temples, homes for the gods. For the Egyptians, temples weren't just pretty buildings. They were gateways to the divine, the earthly homes of gods and goddesses. Ordinary people came here to pray, offer food, and ask for blessings. Priests performed daily rituals, carrying incense, lighting lamps, and chanting sacred hymns. But the innermost chambers, those were strictly off-limits to the public. Deep inside the temple stood a single statue of the god, hidden from ordinary eyes, resting on a golden throne. The priests treated it like a living being, bathing it, dressing it, feeding it offerings of bread, wine, and honey. Yes, the gods got VIP service. Meanwhile, the rest of Egypt waited outside, hoping for divine favor. Luxor, where the gods walked. Our journey begins in Luxor, one of Egypt's most breathtaking temple complexes. Picture it. Giant columns rise toward the sky like an ancient stone forest. Carvings of pharaohs and gods cover the walls, glowing softly under the morning light. This temple was dedicated to Amun-Ra, the king of the gods, and during festivals, his golden statue would be carried out of the sanctuary, placed on a sacred boat, and paraded along the Nile. Imagine the celebration. Priests chanting, musicians playing flutes and drums, dancers twirling in colorful linen dresses. The air smelled of incense, honey, and fresh flowers. For the people of Luxor, this wasn't just ritual. It was magic made real. Karnak, the Forest of Pillars. A short boat ride away, we arrive at Karnak, the largest religious complex in ancient Egypt. This place isn't just a temple, it's an entire city of gods. The moment you walk into the hypo-style hall, you're surrounded by 134 massive stone columns, each carved with hieroglyphs and painted in colors that still peek through after 3,000 years. It feels like entering a giant stone jungle. And here's something incredible. Karnak wasn't built in a day, or even a century. Pharaoh after pharaoh added to it over 2,000 years, each one leaving their mark like artists adding brushstrokes to a masterpiece. But the most magical part? At sunrise during the winter solstice, the temple's central axis aligns perfectly with the sun. For the Egyptians, this wasn't coincidence. This was cosmic engineering. Abu Simbel, the Temple of Giants. Far to the south, near the border with modern Sudan, lies Abu Simbel, one of the most jaw-dropping monuments in Egypt. Built by Ramses II, this temple has 4 colossal statues of the pharaoh himself, each towering 66 feet high, carved directly into the mountainside. Their faces gaze silently over the desert, as if guarding Egypt's southern frontier. But here's where it gets even more magical. Twice a year, during sunrise, the sun's rays travel deep inside the temple's main chamber, lighting up the statues of Ramses and the gods seated beside him. Imagine thousands of people gathered outside, watching the sun awaken the gods inside the mountain. For the Egyptians, it was proof that Ramses ruled not just the land, but the cosmos itself. Edfu, the Falcon's Sanctuary. Our next stop is Edfu Temple, dedicated to Horus, the falcon-headed god of the sky. Here, myths came alive. Priests reenacted the famous battle between Horus and his uncle Seth, the god of chaos. They believed that by retelling the story each year, They kept the balance between order and chaos strong, a kind of ancient reboot for the universe. The walls are covered with stunning carvings showing Horus defeating Seth, falcon wings spread wide, protecting Egypt beneath them. And if you stood here thousands of years ago, you'd hear the soft echoes of drums, chants, and the flap of banners in the warm desert breeze. Philae, the Temple of Isis. Farther south lies Philae Temple, dedicated to Isis, the goddess of magic, love, and healing. Set on a small island surrounded by the Nile's sparkling waters, Philae is one of the most serene places in Egypt. Imagine priests gliding across the river in wooden boats, carrying flowers and incense to offer at Isis's altar. This was a place of miracles, where people came seeking blessings, cures, and guidance. Even today, visitors swear there's something peaceful, almost otherworldly about Philae's quiet courtyards and lotus-filled ponds. Daily life inside the temples. While temples looked grand and mysterious from the outside, they were also busy, living places. Priests woke before dawn to perform sacred rituals. Scribes carefully recorded offerings on papyrus scrolls. Bakers prepared bread for the gods, while brewers made special temple beer. Musicians practiced soft melodies for ceremonies, their harps and flutes filling the halls with gentle echoes. Temples were also centers of science, medicine, and learning. Priests studied astronomy to predict the Nile floods. Healers mixed herbs and oils to treat illnesses. Philosophers debated the meaning of life under shaded porticos. In many ways, temples were like universities, hospitals, and spiritual sanctuaries all rolled into one. Festivals of the gods. Temples were at their most alive during festivals. Imagine thousands of people gathering under the blazing sun, their linen robes billowing in the breeze. Drums thunder, dancers spin, and the smell of roasted duck and honey cakes fills the air. Priests carry statues of the gods out of their sanctuaries, placing them on golden boats to sail along the Nile. The crowds cheer, believing the gods are traveling among them, blessing their fields, families, and futures. At night, oil lamps line the riverbanks, their reflections shimmering like stars on the water. Music drifts across the dark Nile as people celebrate late into the night, giving thanks to the deities who gave them life. The silence of stone. As the centuries passed, the festivals grew quieter. Temples fell to ruin, swallowed by sand and forgotten by time. But stand here today, in the shadow of Karnak's columns or Abu Simbel statues, and listen closely. You'll hear it. The soft echoes of chants, drums, and prayers carried on the desert wind. These temples may be silent now, but their walls still speak. They whisper stories of devotion, magic, and dreams carved in stone. Nightfall by the sacred lake. As the sun dips below the horizon, temple shadows stretch across the sand. The sacred lake beside Karnak glimmers under the moonlight, perfectly still, like a mirror to the heavens. You sit on the warm stone steps, the air smelling faintly of incense and lotus. The wind is soft, the stars endless. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls across the desert. And for a moment, it feels like nothing has changed. The gods still linger here, the temples still breathe, and the Nile still carries whispers of prayers from thousands of years ago. Take a slow, deep breath. The desert night is silent. The stars shine like scattered diamonds above the Nile. For the ancient Egyptians, this quiet darkness wasn't frightening, it was mystical. To them, death wasn't the end. It was just the next chapter. Life after life. The Egyptians truly believed that when someone died, they didn't disappear. Instead, they stepped into a new world, a place where the soul lived forever among the gods, surrounded by endless fields, rivers, and sunshine. But getting there? Not so simple. You couldn't just walk into paradise. There were tests, gates, spells, and paperwork. Yes, even 3,000 years ago, you needed proper documents for the afterlife. The journey of the soul. When someone died, their soul began a long, magical journey through the Duat, the ancient Egyptian underworld. It wasn't a scary place full of monsters. Well, okay, there were a few. It was more like an adventure, crossing rivers, passing through secret gates, and solving puzzles to reach the eternal paradise known as the Field of Reeds. To help with this, Egyptians placed papyrus scrolls filled with spells, prayers, and instructions inside tombs. This collection became known as the Book of the Dead, basically an ancient travel guide for the soul. Some spells were simple. Say these words and you'll pass gate number 3. Others were more poetic. O heart of mine, do not rise against me in judgment. It's fascinating, isn't it? Even thousands of years ago, people prepared for their next life as carefully as they planned their current one. Mummification. Preparing for eternity. But before the soul could start its journey, there was one big task: preserve the body. Why? Because Egyptians believed the soul, called the Ka, needed a safe, recognizable home to return to, even after death. So began one of Egypt's most famous traditions, mummification. Let's walk through the process gently. Don't worry, I'll keep it calm and bedtime friendly. Cleansing the body. The body was carefully washed with water from the Nile and fragrant oils. Removing the organs. The liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines were removed and stored in beautifully carved canopic jars, each protected by a different god. And the heart? Oh no, the heart stayed. Egyptians believed it was the center of thought, emotion, and the soul. Drying and wrapping. The body was packed with natron, a type of natural salt, and left to dry for around 40 days. Afterward, it was wrapped in hundreds of yards of linen, layer after layer, like the world's most sacred gift. Final blessings. Priests recited spells, burned incense, and placed protective amulets between the wrappings, tiny charms shaped like scarabs, ankhs, and eyes of Horus, all meant to guide the soul safely. When it was done, the mummy wasn't seen as a symbol of death. It was a promise of eternal life. The Book of the Dead. Imagine holding a papyrus scroll covered with delicate hieroglyphs and colorful illustrations. This wasn't just a book. It was a survival manual for eternity. The Book of the Dead included spells for protection, keeping away evil spirits, maps of the underworld, yes, literal soul GPS, passwords for secret gates, because apparently even paradise had security checks, prayers to the gods, polite introductions never hurt. The goal was simple: help the soul navigate the Duat and reach the Hall of Judgment, where the final test awaited. The Hall of Judgment. This is where things get interesting and a little dramatic. Inside a great hall, the god Osiris sat on a golden throne, surrounded by 42 divine judges. In the center stood a massive scale, watched closely by the jackal-headed god Anubis. On one side of the scale lay the feather of Maat, the symbol of truth, harmony, and justice. On the other side, your heart. If your heart was lighter than the feather, congratulations! You entered the field of reeds, eternal paradise, endless sunshine, and reunions with loved ones. But if your heart was heavier than the feather, weighed down by lies or cruelty, you faced Ammit, the devourer, a terrifying creature with the head of a crocodile, body of a lion, and back legs of a hippo. Fail the test, and your soul was gone forever. So yeah, being a good person in Egypt, pretty high stakes. The field of reeds, eternal peace. For those who passed the judgment, paradise awaited, the field of reeds. Imagine wide green fields, rivers flowing gently, and an endless horizon where the sun never sets. It looked just like Egypt, fertile, abundant, and beautiful, but without hunger, pain, or fear. Here, families reunited. Farmers tended perfect crops that never failed. Fishermen cast nets into shimmering waters, always pulling up a perfect catch. And the gods? They wandered freely among the people, blessing them with eternal joy. To the Egyptians, this wasn't fantasy. This was home forever. Pharaohs and the afterlife. If this is what ordinary people believed, imagine the afterlife of the pharaohs. Their tombs were stocked with treasures, gold, jewelry, weapons, perfumes, clothes, and even furniture. Pharaohs planned for eternity like most people plan for a weekend trip. King Tutankhamun's tomb alone held thousands of objects, chariots, thrones, golden masks, and even jars of honey, still sealed after more than 3,000 years. It wasn't just wealth. These items were chosen carefully, meant to help the pharaoh rule in the next life just as powerfully as in this one. The eternal flame of faith. What's amazing is how much hope the Egyptians carried about death. Where most ancient civilizations feared the unknown, Egypt prepared for it. Every ritual, every temple, every prayer tied back to one belief: life continues, not as it is now, but in a better, eternal way. Standing here, imagining the flicker of oil lamps inside dark tombs, you can almost feel their faith. They didn't see death as darkness. They saw it as light, waiting on the other side. Night by the tombs. The moon hangs low above the desert, painting the sand in silver. You stand quietly before the entrance of a royal tomb, its walls carved with symbols of rebirth and eternity. A soft wind whispers through the Valley of the Kings, carrying with it voices from 3,000 years ago, prayers, chants, and dreams of forever. You close your eyes and listen. For a moment, you almost believe you can hear them. For the ancient Egyptians, the afterlife wasn't a mystery. It was a promise. Take a deep breath and let the scene unfold. The golden sun reflects on the calm waters of the Nile. Palm trees sway gently, and a soft desert breeze carries the faint scent of lotus flowers. Today, we step into a world of power, beauty, and mystery, the lives of Egypt's legendary queens. These women didn't just wear crowns, they changed history, inspired devotion, and left behind stories that still capture our imagination thousands of years later. Queens in a land of pharaohs. In ancient Egypt, power often flowed through the pharaohs, but behind many great kings stood queens who ruled as equals and sometimes as rulers themselves. These weren't passive figures sitting quietly on thrones. These women built temples, led armies, signed treaties, and shaped religion. They were symbols of beauty, strength, and divine authority, balancing politics, family, and faith like no one else. Let's meet some of the most fascinating queens who earned their place in history. Nefertiti, the icon of beauty. Our journey begins with Nefertiti, whose name means the beautiful one has come, and honestly, she lived up to it. She was the wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten, famous for introducing a religious revolution. Together, they abandoned the traditional gods of Egypt and worshipped Aten, the sun disk, as the one true god. Nefertiti wasn't just standing behind her husband, she was right beside him, shown in carvings wearing the royal crown, leading rituals, and even smiting enemies in battle scenes. And then there's her face. Yes, that famous bust of Nefertiti with perfect symmetry, graceful curves, and a mysterious smile. Over 3,000 years later, she's still considered one of history's most beautiful women. But Nefertiti wasn't just a pretty face. She played a crucial role in holding Egypt together during one of its most chaotic periods. A queen, a priestess, a leader, and a symbol, all in one. Hatshepsut, the queen who became king. Next, we meet Hatshepsut, one of Egypt's most powerful and ambitious rulers. She started as queen, the wife of Pharaoh Thutmose II, but when he died young, she stepped in as regent for her stepson Thutmose III. Over time, she made a bold decision. She wasn't just going to rule for Egypt, she was going to rule as Egypt's pharaoh. Hatshepsut wore the royal kilt, the headdress, and even the ceremonial false beard usually reserved for kings. Her statues showed her as both feminine and masculine, blurring the lines of power and tradition. But she didn't build her reputation on appearances alone. She launched massive trade expeditions, bringing back treasures like gold, ivory, incense, and exotic plants from the mysterious land of Punt. Her reign was peaceful, prosperous, and filled with grand construction projects, including her stunning mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, a masterpiece carved into cliffs along the Nile. Hatshepsut proved one thing clearly: leadership wasn't about gender, it was about vision. Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh. Now, let's sail forward in time to one of the most famous names in all of history, Cleopatra VII. Unlike the queens before her, Cleopatra ruled in Egypt's final chapter as an independent empire during a time when Rome's shadow loomed large. But Cleopatra was no ordinary queen. She was brilliant, strategic, and fearless. She spoke multiple languages, studied science, mathematics, and philosophy, and charmed some of the most powerful men in the ancient world, including Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. But don't mistake her alliances for weakness. Cleopatra was no passive partner. She fought to protect Egypt's sovereignty at a time when empires were falling like sandcastles in the tide. She sailed the Nile in grand ceremonial boats covered in gold and silk, using spectacle as a weapon of politics. Cleopatra knew something most rulers didn't. Power isn't just taken, it's performed. Even today, her legacy is debated. Was she a seductress, a genius strategist, a patriot fighting for her people? Perhaps she was all three and more.
Tia, the queen who advised kings. Before Nefertiti, there was Queen Tia, wife of Pharaoh Amenhotep III and grandmother of King Tutankhamun. Tia wasn't just a royal consort, she was a political powerhouse. Foreign rulers wrote directly to her, seeking advice and alliances, which was almost unheard of for queens at the time. She helped shape Egypt's foreign policy, balanced the interests of powerful priesthoods, and played a key role in maintaining stability during a period of immense wealth and influence. TA's story reminds us that sometimes the quiet voices behind the throne can shape history just as much as the rulers themselves. Ankhesenamun, the tragic queen. Then there's Ankhesenamun, daughter of Nefertiti and wife of the famous boy king Tutankhamun. Her life was short and filled with turmoil. After Tutankhamun's sudden death, she faced a political crisis. Desperate to protect Egypt's throne, she even wrote to the Hittite king, asking him to send one of his sons to marry her, a risky and unheard of move. Her story is shrouded in mystery, but her courage shows how queens often carried the heavy burden of saving dynasties when everything seemed lost. The power of queenship. Egyptian queens weren't simply figureheads. They were symbols of divine balance, representing Isis, the goddess of magic and motherhood, standing beside the pharaoh, who symbolized Osiris. But some queens, like Hatshepsut and Cleopatra, didn't just stand beside kings, they became kings themselves. They proved that power in Egypt wasn't fixed, it was earned. These women built monuments, led armies, forged alliances, and shaped religion. And, perhaps most importantly, they inspired loyalty from priests, soldiers, and entire nations. Night on the Nile. Imagine standing on the palace balcony at Thebes, thousands of years ago. Below, the Nile reflects 1,000 oil lamps from the temple courtyards. Priests chant softly, musicians play harps, and dancers sway under the starlight. The queen steps out, her linen gown flowing in the warm night breeze, her jewelry sparkling like fireflies. For a moment, she pauses, looking out over the river, the lifeline of Egypt, knowing her decisions will shape the destiny of millions. She breathes deeply, calm but unshaken. She is not just a queen. She is Egypt itself. Take a deep breath. The night sky over the Nile is calm, filled with stars. The soft breeze carries the scent of lotus flowers and warm sand. But long ago, this peaceful land wasn't always quiet. Egypt, the land of pharaohs and pyramids, faced moments when the fate of its civilization balanced on the edge of a single decision. This is the story of Egypt's greatest battles, told softly, without the noise of swords, but with the echoes of strategy, courage, and destiny. When empires collided. For thousands of years, the Nile protected Egypt. The vast desert acted like a natural fortress, keeping enemies far away. But as Egypt grew rich and powerful, other kingdoms began to notice. Traders came with spices and gold, and sometimes armies followed. To defend their home, pharaohs became more than kings. They became generals, strategists, and visionaries. The Battle of Megiddo, Thutmose III's brilliant gamble. Our first story begins around 1457 BCE, during the reign of Thutmose III, often called Egypt's Napoleon, though honestly, Thutmose lived 3,000 years earlier, so maybe Napoleon was the Thutmose of France. Thutmose faced a powerful alliance of Canaanite kings threatening Egypt's borders. His generals wanted to take the long, safe route to battle, but Thutmose had another idea.
He led his army through a narrow mountain pass, a risky shortcut the enemy thought was impossible. When his forces emerged, the Canaanites were shocked. Egypt appeared where no army should have been. The result? A stunning victory. Megiddo became Egypt's first recorded battle, etched on temple walls and hieroglyphs that still survive today. And Thutmose? He didn't just win, he secured control over trade routes, bringing unimaginable wealth to Egypt. The Battle of Kadesh. Ramses II versus the Hittites. Fast forward to 1274 BCE, and Egypt faces one of its greatest rivals, the Hittite Empire. Pharaoh Ramses II, also known as Ramses the Great, marched north with thousands of soldiers and hundreds of chariots to confront the Hittites near the city of Kadesh. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Ramses thought he had surprise on his side, but the Hittites had tricked him with false information. He charged ahead straight into an ambush. For a moment, things looked dire. Ramses himself was nearly surrounded. But in one of history's most dramatic turnarounds, Ramses rallied his men, called reinforcements, and pushed the Hittites back. The battle ended in a stalemate, no clear winner. But what happened afterward was even remarkable. Ramses and the Hittite king signed the world's first recorded peace treaty. Imagine that! Two ancient superpowers deciding that talking was better than fighting, a lesson the modern world still struggles to learn. The Sea Peoples, defending Egypt's shores. Not all threats came from neighboring empires. Around 1200 BCE, mysterious invaders known only as the Sea Peoples appeared, attacking Egypt's coasts with fleets of ships. No one really knows where they came from. Some say the Mediterranean islands, others believe southern Europe. But one thing is clear, they were skilled warriors and they came prepared. Pharaoh Ramses III met them head-on in a naval battle, one of the earliest recorded in history. Egyptian archers lined the riverbanks, firing arrows while ships rammed into each other on the waves. Ramses III's clever tactics saved Egypt, but the battles drained resources and weakened the empire. It was one of the first signs that Egypt's golden age wouldn't last forever. Borders and balance. Here's the thing about ancient Egypt. Most of the time, it wasn't constantly at war. Pharaohs understood something important. Peace built pyramids, not battles. When conflicts did happen, they weren't just about land. They were about control of trade routes, resources, and influence. The Nile was Egypt's lifeline, and whoever controlled the surrounding regions controlled Egypt's future. That's why many pharaohs became masters of diplomacy, signing alliances, arranging marriages, and sending gifts to other kingdoms. Sometimes a golden necklace achieved more than 1,000 swords. The quiet heroes. While pharaohs and generals are remembered, Egypt's victories often came down to the ordinary soldiers, farmers, craftsmen, and fishermen called to defend their home. Imagine standing in their sandals, the sun blazing, the air dry, your heart pounding. You're holding a spear made of acacia wood, facing an enemy you've never seen before. These weren't career warriors. They were everyday people who believed Egypt was worth protecting. And because of them, the temples, pyramids, and villages we talk about today still exist. Lessons from the battlefield. The great battles of Egypt weren't just about winning or losing. They taught lessons about strategy, courage, and patience. Thutmose III taught us to take bold risks. Ramses II showed us that even in conflict, diplomacy matters. And Ramses III reminded us that preparation can save a nation. But perhaps the greatest lesson is this. Even at its height, Egypt knew that lasting power comes not from swords, but from stability. Night by the river. The day fades now, and the Nile reflects the soft glow of the setting sun. The air cools, and the sounds of distant birds echo across the water. You sit by the riverbank, imagining the voices of the past, soldiers chanting, chariot wheels rumbling, drums beating faintly in the distance. And then, silence. The battles are over, the generals are gone, the kingdoms have turned to dust. But Egypt remains. Its temples still stand. Its stories still live. Its echoes still whisper in the desert wind. Take a deep breath. The golden sun is rising over the Nile, and the sound of birds echoes softly across the riverbanks. Imagine yourself walking through an ancient temple, the walls covered in mysterious symbols carved deep into the stone. Tiny pictures of birds, snakes, eyes, and lotus flowers. You pause, tracing your fingers over them, wondering, what do these symbols mean? To the ancient Egyptians, this wasn't just writing. This was the language of the gods. The birth of hieroglyphs. Thousands of years ago, Egyptians created one of the world's earliest and most beautiful writing systems, hieroglyphs. Unlike modern alphabets, hieroglyphs weren't just letters. They were pictures with power. A single symbol could represent a sound, a word, or an entire idea. For example, an owl might mean the sound M. A ripple of water could stand for N. A seated God symbol might represent the word divine. Hieroglyphs were carefully carved into stone for eternity, or painted in bright colors on papyrus for everyday use. Each one was drawn with precision, almost like a small piece of art. And honestly, they made our modern texts look a little boring. Scribes, keepers of knowledge. But hieroglyphs weren't for everyone. In fact, only a small group of people knew how to read and write them, the scribes. Scribes were like the Google Drive of ancient Egypt. They recorded everything: royal decrees, tax records, temple inventories, religious texts, and magical spells. Becoming a scribe wasn't easy. It required years of training in special schools where students practiced writing on clay tablets, shards of pottery, and papyrus scrolls. But once trained, scribes held one of the most respected jobs in Egypt. They worked alongside pharaohs, priests, and architects, preserving Egypt's history for generations. And yes, they were probably the busiest people in the kingdom. Imagine being the one responsible for taking notes at every royal meeting. No pressure. Papyrus, the ancient paper. Of course, all this writing needed something to be written on, and Egypt invented one of the most revolutionary materials in history, papyrus. Made from the tall green papyrus plant that grew along the Nile, these sheets were light, smooth, and surprisingly durable. The process was simple but genius. Thin strips of papyrus stalk were sliced. They were soaked, layered, and pressed tightly together. After drying under the sun, they became a smooth, pale surface ready for ink. Papyrus scrolls were rolled, tied with string and stored in temple libraries or royal archives. Some even survive for thousands of years. Proof that ancient Egyptians were way ahead of their time when it came to document preservation. The Rosetta Stone, unlocking the code. For centuries, hieroglyphs were a mystery. After Egypt's ancient knowledge faded, no one knew how to read these symbols anymore. Then, in 1799, everything changed when French soldiers discovered the Rosetta Stone, a black slab carved with the same text written in 3 scripts: hieroglyphs, Demotic, a later Egyptian script, and ancient Greek. Scholars realized this was the key, and after years of careful study, Jean-François Champollion finally cracked the code in 1822. Imagine the excitement. After 1,400 years of silence, the voices of ancient Egypt spoke again. Words that held power. In Egypt, writing wasn't just for record-keeping, it was magic. They believed that words carried life. If you wrote someone's name, you gave it power. That's why pharaohs had their names carved deep into stone monuments, so their memory would live forever. On the flip side, erasing a name was believed to erase a soul's existence in the afterlife. That's why enemies were sometimes literally deleted from history by chiseling out their names. Writing wasn't just communication, it was immortality. Temples as libraries. Temples weren't just places of worship, they were also centers of knowledge. Inside, walls were covered with sacred texts, astronomical charts, and healing spells. Priests carefully copied hymns, rituals, and instructions for ceremonies, preserving wisdom generation after generation. Some temples even kept vast libraries of papyrus scrolls, containing everything from medical recipes to star maps. These were the ancient world's archives of science and spirituality combined. Daily life and writing. Not all writing was sacred, though. Scribes also handled the ordinary business of life, counting grain for taxes, recording deliveries for markets, writing love letters sealed with wax, composing bedtime stories for children. Yes, you read that right. Egyptians had romantic poems, jokes, and even sarcastic notes complaining about work. Some fragments of papyrus show playful messages between scribes. Don't forget the beer delivery this time. Even 3,000 years ago, office humor existed. The beauty of hieroglyphs. Take a closer look at a temple wall. Each symbol, carved by hand, carries both meaning and artistry. Birds stretch their wings mid-flight. Eyes gaze forward with calm precision. Lotus flowers bloom in eternal stone. These weren't just letters. They were stories frozen in time, blending language, art, and spirituality into one. And when the sunlight hits them just right, the walls almost glow as if the gods themselves left messages for anyone patient enough to listen. A language that survived time. Even though hieroglyphs eventually faded and were replaced by other scripts, their beauty never disappeared. Today, we can read the prayers whispered to Osiris, the love poems written for Nefertiti, and the royal decrees signed by Ramses the Great. Through hieroglyphs, ancient Egyptians still speak to us across thousands of years. Every carved line, every painted scroll, every inked symbol carries a message. We were here, we dreamed, we built. Remember us. Night in the temple library. The sun has set now, and the temple grows quiet. An oil lamp flickers softly, lighting up rows of papyrus scrolls stored carefully on wooden shelves. A young scribe sits cross-legged on the floor, dipping his reed pen into black ink. Outside, the desert wind rustles gently, carrying the distant sound of the Nile flowing under the moonlight. You watch as he writes, slowly, patiently, preserving a prayer meant to last forever. And in that moment, you realize, These weren't just words, they were whispers to eternity. Take a deep breath and close your eyes. The warm desert breeze brushes your face, carrying grains of sand that have whispered across the Nile for thousands of years. The sun begins to set, casting a soft golden glow over the cliffs of Luxor. We're standing at the entrance to one of the most mysterious places in Egypt, the Valley of the Kings, a land of silence, a land of secrets, a place where pharaohs prepared for eternity. The Valley of the Kings. Here, hidden among rocky hills, lie more than 60 tombs carved deep into the limestone. No giant pyramids rise here, no towering monuments announce their presence. This valley was chosen for one reason: secrecy. By the time of the New Kingdom, pharaohs had learned an important lesson. Massive pyramids were like giant "steal me" signs for tomb robbers. So instead, they hid their treasures underground, deep inside the hills. But even here, secrecy didn't always work. Most tombs were looted long ago. And yet, one of the greatest discoveries in archaeology was still waiting, untouched, for over 3,000 years. Tutankhamun's tomb, the boy king's secret. In 1922, British archaeologist Howard Carter uncovered something the world had been dreaming of for centuries: the tomb of Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun, or King Tut, wasn't a powerful ruler. He died young, around 18 or 19 years old, and his reign was short. But somehow, his resting place escaped looters, buried beneath layers of rubble that kept it hidden. When Carter opened the door, he peered inside by candlelight and saw something dazzling. When asked if he could see anything, he whispered, "Yes, wonderful things." Inside were more than 5,000 artifacts: golden statues, chariots, jewelry, weapons, perfumes, furniture, and at the heart of it all, Tutankhamun's famous golden mask. Made of solid gold and inlaid with lapis lazuli and turquoise, the mask still glows softly, as if holding the light of eternity. The treasures of eternity. For Egyptians, treasures weren't just wealth. They were tools for the afterlife. Inside Pharaoh's tombs, archaeologists have found golden scarab amulets for protection, tiny Shabti figurines meant to serve the king in the next world, elaborate canopic jars holding carefully preserved organs, chariots, beds, and even board games, because who wants an afterlife without entertainment? Everything was chosen with care, based on the belief that the afterlife wasn't just spiritual, it was a continuation of life itself, filled with comfort, beauty, and joy. Hidden chambers and forgotten tombs. Even today, the Valley of the Kings keeps its secrets. Modern technology has revealed hidden passageways inside known tombs, suggesting that there are still unopened chambers waiting to be discovered. One of the biggest mysteries surrounds Tutankhamun's tomb itself. Some researchers believe there may be secret rooms behind its walls, possibly even the resting place of Queen Nefertiti. Scans, radar imaging, and new excavations continue to hint at possibilities, but the desert guards its secrets carefully. Sometimes silence is louder than discovery. The tomb of Seti I. Among the many royal tombs, one stands out for its sheer beauty. The tomb of Seti I. Its walls are covered with brilliantly painted scenes of gods, stars, and endless skies. Entire passages are dedicated to guiding the pharaoh through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. Walking through Seti's tomb today feels like stepping into another realm,
where the boundary between life and death disappears and the universe unfolds in color.
The Curse of the Pharaohs. No story about Tutankhamun's tomb is complete without mentioning the famous curse. When Howard Carter's team entered the tomb, several people connected to the discovery died mysteriously soon after. Newspapers at the time whispered about the wrath of the pharaohs. In truth, scientists later suggested these deaths may have been caused by toxic mold sealed inside the tomb for centuries. But even so, the idea of an ancient curse still captures the imagination, a reminder that some doors, once opened, changed the world forever. Royal tombs beyond the kings. While the Valley of the Kings is the most famous, it isn't alone. Nearby lies the Valley of the Queens, where the wives and children of pharaohs were laid to rest. One of the most beautiful tombs belongs to Queen Nefertari, wife of Ramses II. Her resting place is decorated with vivid paintings showing her playing board games with the gods, walking under the stars, and holding lotus flowers in eternal serenity. The colors remain so bright after 3,000 years that stepping inside feels like walking into a dream. Lost tombs. Lost pharaohs. For all we've discovered, so much remains hidden. Historians believe there are still dozens of undiscovered tombs beneath the sands, waiting quietly for their stories to be told. Some belong to minor kings and queens. Others may hold answers to mysteries that have puzzled archaeologists for centuries. Every grain of sand here feels like it's guarding a secret. And perhaps some secrets aren't ready to be found yet. Night in the valley. The sun finally sets behind the limestone cliffs, painting the valley in shades of deep gold and soft violet. The wind grows cooler, carrying the whispers of thousands of years. Standing here, you feel a strange stillness, as though time itself has stopped. You imagine pharaohs being carried here in golden boats, priests chanting softly, and oil lamps flickering against walls covered in stars and spells. The valley sleeps now, silent and eternal, holding treasures beyond gold, the dreams, hopes, and memories of an entire civilization. And as the moon rises, silvering the desert floor, you take one last look at the tombs carved into the hills. Even in silence, they seem to speak. We were here. We ruled. We dreamed of forever.
Take a deep breath. The sun is setting over the Nile, painting the water in shades of gold and amber. The temples still stand, the pyramids still touch the sky, and the statues of the gods still watch over the desert. But behind this beauty, Egypt's golden age was slowly fading. The turning point. For thousands of years, Egypt had been a land of power, wealth, and stability. The Nile provided food, the temples provided faith, and the pharaohs provided leadership. But over time, cracks began to form. Pharaohs became less powerful, priests grew more influential, and the once mighty kingdom found itself struggling to hold everything together. No single event caused Egypt's decline. It was a slow unraveling, like threads loosening from a magnificent tapestry. Invasions and instability. Around 1100 BCE, Egypt faced new threats from every direction. The mysterious sea peoples attacked from the north,
Neighboring kingdoms tested Egypt's borders, trade routes shifted, and food shortages became common. Pharaohs struggled to keep control, but maintaining an empire this vast was no easy task. Even when Egypt won battles, the victories often came at a cost. Resources drained, soldiers were exhausted, and slowly, Egypt's influence began to shrink. Foreign rulers, new dynasties. Over the centuries, Egypt became a prize for other rising powers. The Assyrians invaded around 671 BCE, ruling briefly but leaving their mark. The Persians arrived next, turning Egypt into a province within their growing empire. Then came the Greeks, led by Alexander the Great in 332 BCE. He was welcomed as a liberator and founded the city of Alexandria, which became a center of knowledge and trade. Finally, the Romans claimed Egypt in 30 BCE after the tragic death of Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh. Each new ruler brought change, new gods, new customs, and new politics, but somehow Egypt's soul endured. The fall of the Pharaohs. Cleopatra's death marked the true end of an era. For over 3,000 years, pharaohs had ruled as living gods. Now, Egypt became just another province in a vast empire. Temples slowly lost their importance, ancient rituals faded, the hieroglyphs carved into stone were forgotten, their meaning locked away for centuries. It must have been strange, living among the pyramids, seeing the statues of Ramses and Hatshepsut towering above, but knowing Egypt was no longer its own. A land of knowledge. Even as Egypt's political power faded, its intellectual influence grew. The Library of Alexandria, one of the greatest centers of learning in the ancient world, held hundreds of thousands of scrolls from across civilizations. Scholars studied astronomy, medicine, mathematics, and philosophy, building on knowledge gathered over millennia. Egyptian discoveries, from papyrus to medicine, architecture to engineering, inspired the Greeks, the Romans, and countless others who came after. In many ways, Egypt's ideas traveled even further than its armies ever did. The spirit that never died. Here's the thing. Egypt's story didn't end with its decline. Yes, the kingdoms fell. Yes, the pharaohs disappeared. But the spirit of Egypt, that survived. The pyramids still rise against the desert sky. The temples of Luxor and Karnak still hold whispers of the gods. The tombs of the valley still guard secrets yet to be uncovered. And hieroglyphs, once lost to time, now speak to us again thanks to the Rosetta Stone. After centuries of silence, the voices of ancient Egypt have returned. Legacy in the modern world. From architecture to science, religion to storytelling, Egypt's influence is everywhere. The Greek and Roman worlds borrowed heavily from Egyptian art, religion, and astronomy. The idea of life after death shaped spiritual traditions far beyond the Nile. Even today, engineers study the pyramids, amazed by their precision and endurance. Egypt taught the world about harmony, balance, and the power of human imagination. Whispers in the desert. Imagine standing beneath the Great Pyramid at night. The desert wind brushes softly against your face, and the stars glitter like diamonds above. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you hear echoes, chants, prayers, footsteps on temple floors, and the distant sound of drums. It feels as if time itself has folded, as though ancient Egypt is still here, just beneath the surface of the present. Because in a way, it is. An eternal civilization. Civilizations rise and fall, but few leave a mark as deep as Egypt's. From the first hieroglyph carved into stone to the last pharaoh's crown, every story, every temple, every riverbank holds a piece of eternity. Egypt may have lost its political power, but it gained something far greater: immortality. Its symbols live on, its stories still inspire, and its mysteries continue to fascinate us thousands of years later. Night over the Nile. The sun has set now. The Nile glows under the silver light of the moon. Palm trees sway gently, and the distant desert seems endless and quiet. You sit on the riverbank, feeling the warm sand beneath your fingers. Somewhere, an owl calls in the distance, and the breeze carries the scent of lotus flowers. In this silence, you understand something the Egyptians always believed. Life may change, kingdoms may fall, but memory is eternal. The land of the Pharaohs still speaks. You just have to listen.
Take a deep breath. The cool desert breeze brushes against your skin as the golden sands of Egypt stretch endlessly beneath the setting sun. You've walked through thousands of years across temples, pyramids, palaces, and tombs. You've met pharaohs, queens, priests, and scribes. You've heard their whispers and their dreams. And now, as the journey comes to an end, it's time to slowly return, carrying the stories of ancient Egypt within you. Footsteps through time. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the footsteps we've traced. Along the calm banks of the Nile, where farmers cast their nets as lotus flowers floated nearby. Through the busy streets of Thebes, filled with music, markets, and the scent of honey cakes. Into grand temples where incense curled toward ceilings painted with stars and chants echoed softly through stone halls. Beneath towering pyramids where dreams of eternity were carved into blocks of limestone. Every place we visited has left a mark, not just on the land, but on us. The timeless river. The Nile has been our constant companion, flowing quietly beside us through every chapter. It gave life to Egypt, its farms, its festivals, its faith. And thousands of years later, it still flows, carrying stories like ripples across time. Listen for a moment. You can almost hear the soft splash of oars, the laughter of fishermen, and the gentle hum of prayers offered at the riverbanks. The Nile reminds us that even as empires rise and fall, life continues. Its waters are the same ones touched by pharaohs, queens, and ordinary families thousands of years ago. The river is Egypt's heartbeat, and it never stopped.
Whispers of the Pharaohs. Think back to the voices we've heard. Narmer uniting Upper and Lower Egypt into one kingdom. Toser and Sneferu daring to dream of monuments touching the sky. Hatshepsut ruling as a king and proving that leadership has no boundaries. Ramses the Great, who fought battles and signed peace with empires beyond the Nile. Cleopatra, standing proud as Egypt's last pharaoh, facing the tides of history. Their stories are carved into stone and written in papyrus, but more importantly, they live in the silent air of Egypt's deserts, carried by the wind like whispers. The silent guardians. Remember the pyramids at Giza? Under the sun, they looked eternal, and under the stars, they feel even more alive. They've seen storms and invasions, dynasties and decline. The Great Sphinx still watches silently, its gaze locked on the horizon, as if waiting for secrets yet untold. And deep within the Valley of the Kings, tombs sleep beneath layers of sand, holding treasures, mysteries, and dreams carved in gold. Some secrets we've uncovered, others still wait patiently for the right moment to reveal themselves. the language that speaks forever. Think of the hieroglyphs we traced with our fingertips, tiny symbols carved into stone, telling stories of gods, love, and eternity. For centuries they were silent. Then the Rosetta Stone gave them back their voice, and suddenly the Egyptians began to speak to us again. It's a reminder that even when memories fade, they're never truly lost. Somewhere, in ink or stone, in song or silence, the past always finds its way back.
Lessons from Egypt. After walking through 5,000 years of history, what do we take with us? Faith. The Egyptians believed in something greater than themselves, and that belief gave them purpose. Harmony. They lived in rhythm with the Nile, respecting the balance between nature and life. Legacy. They dreamed of eternity and built monuments, stories, and ideas that still endure today. Egypt teaches us that true immortality isn't just about gold or stone. It's about the memories we leave behind, the stories we pass on, and the ways we inspire those who come after us. Returning to the present. The journey is almost over. The desert grows quiet, the stars appear one by one, and the cool wind carries the scent of the Nile at night. You open your eyes slowly, and the ancient world fades. The temples, the pharaohs, the golden masks, they rest where they've always been, tucked safely inside the sands of time. But something feels different now, because Egypt isn't just a place you visited, it's a part of you, a memory carried forward, a quiet voice reminding you of the strength, dreams, and wonders of those who came before.
Night over the Nile. The moon reflects on the river like silver glass. Somewhere, a fisherman sings softly to himself as he pulls in his nets. Palm leaves rustle in the breeze, and the warm sand cools beneath the quiet sky. You take one last deep breath. The journey may end here, but Egypt, the land of gods and kings, of love and mystery, of life and eternity, will always remain alive in your heart. And as the night settles gently over the river, you carry one final thought with you. We are all part of history. We walk among echoes, and like the Nile, our stories will flow forever.